Hey Loc Stars, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, the Loc Doctress, and today we're diving deep into a detailed loc repair and extension session. This is going to be an extensive process, so get comfortable, grab a snack, grab a notepad, and let's talk about the art of repairing and reinforcing locs. So today my client came in with a set of locs that needed some extra love. We're dealing with weak spots, breakage, and short locs that need to be blended with longer ones. She already has some loc extensions in place from when she had an undercut and we added some locs in there, but we're going to enhance them by adding new ones that match her existing size and texture, making sure everything blends seamlessly. So loc repair isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about restoring length, the strength of your hair, balance, and longevity so that they can continue to thrive. A lot of people don't realize that even though locs are known for being low maintenance, they still need proper care to prevent thinning and breakage. So today I'm going to walk you through the entire process, assessing, reinforcing, adding length, and tightening with crochet to create a seamless, natural look. Let's get into it. Before starting any repair, the first and most important step is assessing the locs. Every head of locs tells a different story, and I feel like I can just look at a set of locs and know what you've been doing wrong, when you started switching stylists, when you had different methods of maintenance, and so on and so forth. So some people have completely natural locs, some people have extensions, and then there are those who, like where we're working on, she has a combination of both natural hair and loc extensions that need to be blended together. So what I'm looking for here are the areas that need reinforcement. I can already see some thinning on the locs and those weak spots, and even some uneven sections where the natural locs and the extensions aren't blending as smoothly as they should. Now let's talk about why this happens. Thinning and weak spots can occur for so many reasons. Over manipulation, too much tension from styling, excessive retwisting. You got crochet on your extensions and they are not tight enough, so you haven't been getting your necessary crochet repairs, or even just the weight of the extensions over time, right? If you have loc extensions, it's especially important to keep an eye on how they're holding up, because if they're not installed correctly, or if they're even too heavy for your natural hair, it can cause breakage. Another thing, washing excessively, and as I mentioned before, not doing enough crochet touch-ups. So for this client, I'm noticing that her natural locs have matured well, but there are a few areas where her hair has thinned slightly from the weight of the extensions. We don't want to lose any of her progress, so instead of just letting these weak points go, I'm going to reinforce them using the crochet method, which will strengthen and fill out the locs without causing unnecessary stress. So now that I've identified the weak areas, the first thing I'm going to do is fill them in using my Macon Styles Afro Kinky loose natural hair. This is an important step because when locs start to thin, they're at risk of breaking completely if they're not reinforced. I'm using the crochet method to integrate loose hair into these weak spots. This technique is so amazing because it really allows me to rebuild the structure of the loc without using any products that cause buildup, without using any thread, without using any other of those, methods that are really temporary. This is more of a permanent fix to a weak spot. So unlike twisting or palm rolling, right, those are temporary methods. Crochet work, it really creates that instant reinforcement by tangling the hair back into the loc itself, and it's going to make the loc stronger without unraveling over time. So there are different methods for doing this. Some people do the braid and wrap method. Some people do, just kind of lay over and wrap. This is the most secure method, the more stronger, longer lasting. So one thing I can always tell I let my clients know that thinning doesn't mean that your locks are ruined. It just means that they need a little extra support. Weak spots are completely normal, especially as locks mature. And if you catch them early on, you can prevent breakage before it happens. I also want to point out that adding hair to weak spots isn't about making the locks thicker than it should be. It's about restoring the natural density so the locks remain uniform. This is so important because sometimes I see people do the repairs and they're creating an extra layer of the locks that makes the size inconsistent with the rest of the locks. So that uniformity is very essential. If you overdo it, the locks can become too bulky, and that's not what we want. The goal is to reinforce them while keeping everything balanced. So on those shorter locks, I'm going in and adding length as well. So now that we've reinforced those weak spots, we're adding in those extensions on the shorter locks. One of the biggest challenges with lock repair is ensuring that all the locks are even and cohesive. While some locks are much shorter than others, it can create an uneven look that makes styling difficult. So a little bit later, we're going to be doing a trim because the client's hair is very choppy. She has several different lengths throughout her locks. And I personally feel that trimming is an essential just for grooming on locks in general. It's one of those things that with stylists, we tell clients to get a trim. And for some reason, we always want to hold on to the length when it comes to our locks. But trimming of hair is just a normal grooming practice, regardless if your hair is locked or loose, right? So sometimes we're going an extended amount of time without trimming the locks, and this is creating an uneven look, right? So back to what I was saying, since my client already has loc extensions in some areas, we're going to add some additional pieces to match the existing size and texture of her locks. This is super important because when blending extensions with natural locks, you don't want it to be obvious where the natural hair stops and the extension begins. So I'm going to be blending that. The key to a natural blend is choosing the right type of hair. As mentioned, I'm using the afro kinky 100% human hair from Macon Styles. And so this is the texture that's going to blend and mimic the client's own texture. I'm crocheting these new extensions in strand by strand to ensure a seamless transition. One thing I always stress is that not every lock on your head has to be an extension for it to work. My client has a mix of natural and extended locks, and that's perfectly fine. This was a situation where, she didn't want to start the locks in the back from scratch because she was getting undercuts. So it's not considered cheating. It's really only something you're supposed to know. No one is supposed to just be able to come up to your hair and tell their extensions, right? And if that's something you choose to share, then that's your prerogative. As long as everything blends well, you can still have an authentic lock journey even with added length. Some people think, extensions mean fake locks, quote unquote, but that's not true at all. Extensions can serve many purposes. They can help you maintain your length if you've experienced breakage. They can give you a more uniform look, or even just help you start your journey with a little extra volume. The key is proper installation and care. So now that the repairs and the extensions are in place, I'm going to go in with some extensive crochet work to refine everything and make sure these locks are secure. Crochet is one of my favorite techniques because it tightens, smooths, and reinforces the locks instantly, unlike twisting or interlocking, which honestly, it can put tension on the roots, but of course that also depends on who's doing it. But honestly, crochet allows me to work directly with the hair without pulling or adding any extra strain on the scalp. So as I go through each lock, I'm making sure that the extensions are secure, the weak spots are reinforced, and everything is blended naturally. This process requires patience, but when it's done right, the results last much longer than traditional retwisting. Now, I'm still going to go in and just retwist her roots, right? Because her roots are frizzy. She wants to get a full grooming, but this is separate from the grooming of the actual lock strand. When clients are booking, I always emphasize it's crochet maintenance. That's something that you have to find out whether you need it done on your roots or if you need it done on the lock strand. Not every appointment is going to be for a crochet, whereas every appointment you get every 3 weeks or so would be for a retwist. So sometimes I look at the client's hair, and that's something I would evaluate and let the client know how often they should be getting crochet, how often they should be getting a retwist, or how often they should be getting an interlock. So I would recommend that just being a Loctician recommendation as far as the crochet is concerned, rather than trying to implement that on your own, because crochet is something that, if done incorrectly, done too frequently, done with the wrong hook size, there's just too many things that can go wrong that I've seen with crochet. And so it's best to leave it up to the professional. That way your locks don't end up having extra bulges to them or being overly tightened or any of the other issues that I've seen happen with locks. The crochet needle really does permanently cause damage to your locks if done incorrectly. And so it's something that can't be undone, right? We can comb out locks, things like that can happen, but sometimes when the crochet is done incorrectly, combing out can result in you losing so much of your length. So, or shedding of the hair because it may get broken off. So, just keep those things in mind. I always like to educate my clients on the crochet process. So it's really something that's recommended on a case-by-case basis. On this client here, what I'm doing is getting closer to the roots because her hairline, which this is common for a lot of clients as well, the hair along the edges or in the nape tend to grow separate from the loc extension or the natural lock. And if that's happening, you need more reinforcement on the scalp towards the base of the lock versus crochet on the strand of the lock. So that's what I said before, as far as it being essential to know where you need the crochet. I know whenever there's an excess amount of frizz, I try to focus on doing crochet touch-ups on the roots, and that's going to help to restore the locks on the scalp and make sure that they're constantly growing out the same size as the lock strand. I've had clients previously where they're experiencing a lot of frizz along the hairline or just frizz anywhere in their hair, and they're not getting it crocheted, and they start experiencing thinning of the lock itself. Well, the lock itself is only thinning because the hair is not being fed into the lock strand, and this is resulting in the hair growing separate from the lock and it's thinning out. So that crochet process, it focuses in on the roots, and it's something that I probably recommend once every 6 to 8 weeks, right? Because that's really only something you want to get when there's an excess amount of new growth or an excess amount of frizz. The only time you should be experiencing an excess amount of new growth or an excess amount of frizz is when it's been either months since your last retwist or grooming, or if you just get a lot of new growth, because your texture determines this as well. But say if you're getting an excess amount of new growth in a shorter period of time, then that's something we're looking for. But normal general rule of thumb is 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 8 to 10 weeks. And that's where we can start seeing a lot of the frizziness along the scalp or on the hairline. Something else to keep in mind if you are someone who likes to scratch a lot, those hairs are going to be breaking out of the locks. Whenever doing a crochet touch up on the roots, I make sure I advise my clients, if you are scratching your scalp, when you go and shampoo your own hair, if you're shampooing at home in the shower and you are, washing it in a way where you're scrubbing and digging, the hairs are breaking out of the locks because a lot of these hairs, especially along the hairline, they are shorter, they're more fragile, they are not as dense, not as thick. Some people have thin hair around the hairline. And so if you're scratching or overly scrubbing those areas when you're shampooing, that could be a huge factor as far as why the hair is breaking off and you have a lot of this patchy hair in between. Sometimes it's not just strictly you got an excess amount of new growth, right? Sometimes it's those actions that's contributing to it. So keep that in mind. I like to make sure that you're doing the at-home care. Make sure the at-home care is being prioritized so that when you come to the salon, you're not spending as much getting all of these services done. So now I'm in the process of doing a trim. Earlier, I was talking about trimming, and this is where we go ahead and bring some of those layers up because as you can see, and I'm glad this client had on a white shirt, but you can see how many different layers there are with the locks, and it's creating that choppy look. You can see on the far left, that handful of locks is very short compared to the rest. So we're going to go ahead and bring up the length by maybe an inch or two and make sure everything is consistent. We don't want to 100% get rid of the layers. So I'm not chopping straight across with the blunt cut. What I'm doing is just going through and trimming the locks that need to be trimmed so that all of the locks can have a similar layer. Whereas, you have so many that are hanging a couple inches below most of the locks, those should be addressed by taking the length up by at least an inch or two. Trims are necessary. Trims are normal. This is something that's just in the natural hair community or hair community. With all stylists, we normally recommend doing trims for our clients so that we're not experiencing breakage. Sometimes the weak spots that we're seeing on the ends of the locks is a result of never getting the locks trimmed. So if that's the case for you, then you may want to consider doing a trim. Sometimes I've talked to clients and I've asked them when was their last trim, and they've had their locks for several years and they've never had them trimmed. And so don't be afraid of the trims. It makes your locks much healthier. Now, the type of trim that you get, that's just personal preference. Like I said, I'm not doing a blunt cut straight across trim here where all of the locks are the same exact length. Some clients don't really like that look. Some clients like the more layered, staggered effect, if you will. And it creates more of that variation so all of the locks don't look perfect. However, some clients do prefer the straight across blunt cut. Some clients like a little bit more shape to their locks, so they want a U cut or a V shape cut. And so it's good to just talk to your loctician and explore those options if you are wanting to do a trim. But the trim is necessary for proper grooming of your locks, especially long term. If you've had your locks for several years, you want to at least get one trim and take off about an inch or two of the tips, depending on how the ends look. If you don't ever want to trim your locks because that's just something you're against, it's cutting your locks, that's totally fine as well. But something to remember, if you're taking that route, you will end up having to do some repairs down the line, right? Sometimes those weak spots on the ends, is a result of the breakage on the locks and it's not being trimmed off. So if you're okay with, say, getting those weak spots filled in or just letting them fall out, you would have to consider that as an option. Earlier, you saw how I was using the afro kinky hair to do the fill-ins. Some clients don't like extensions added to their natural locks if they're thinning and breaking off. But this is one of the only ways that you will be able to save your locks without cutting them. So sometimes you have to kind of pick your poison, if you will. If you don't want a weak spot, you're going to have to either trim the locks or you're going to have to fill in the locks. If you don't do either of those, then the lock eventually will fall off. It's just a matter of time. Sometimes it happens after you wash it. Sometimes it happens, you're taking your locks down and just locks are just falling out. And I'm not talking about the full lock falling out from the scalp. I'm talking about a piece of the lock falling out from the very ends because the ends aren't being cut. That's a totally different thing from the lock falling out from the scalp. A lock falling out from the scalp indicates a bigger issue. That is, your lock itself is not really hanging on by much of a foundation from the scalp. And so the scalp has become so thin or broken off that the locks are not able to sustain. Okay, but here, as you can see, the client has a nice healthy scalp, and we're retwisting, doing a really good grooming as well as a 2-strand twist. And you can see how well this trim worked for the 2-strand. Doing the 2-strand, especially, that helps with, making sure all of the locks look even. And especially because 2 locks have to be joined together. Sometimes when we're doing the 2-strand twist, one lock is excessively long and another lock is super short. So that's happening because you're never getting a trim, right? So trimming the locks actually helps to bring that length closer to the rest of the locks so that when you're doing styles like 2-strand, you don't have to worry about over wrapping your locks so that you can get the locks to the point that they match in terms of length. So right now that grooming is going to be nice and healthy. Will probably be another few weeks before, she needs a retwist because, as we all know, the 2-strand twist is going to be a longer lasting maintenance for her. It's going to protect the retwist. It's a protective style, if you will, without adding any extensions on top of it. So now that the repairs are complete, let's take a moment to really appreciate the transformation. My client's locks look stronger, fuller, and more uniform than when we started. And I really just love seeing the confidence boost that comes with a fresh repair sometimes. All you need is a little reinforcement to fall back in love with your lock journey. So if you're dealing with thinning, breakage, or any uneven locks or anything of that nature, don't feel discouraged. There are so many ways to restore and maintain your locks so that they can keep thriving. So I hope this video was helpful. If you're considering lock repair, please go ahead, drop a comment, and let's chat. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. And until next time, stay locked and lovely.